This is your local election headquarters.
Welcome back. Today we are joined by Congressman Garret Graves, who just announced last week that you will not be running for re-election in Congress. So it's great to have you on so soon to talk about everything.
Hey, great to be back. Thanks, Shannon.
So Garret, I just want to dive right into it. You are not running in any of the districts, especially your own, that's been completely redrawn. So tell me about what led you to that decision.
Well, look, it's been a complete honor to represent this area for a number of years, and we've had some huge wins. But at the end of the day, we looked at these new maps, we looked at the different congressional districts, and began looking at the pros and cons. And, you know, unfortunately, the entire capital region has now been split up into 4 different congressional districts. And so we began focusing on 2 of them and just looking at the district that goes from Bogalusa to Denham Springs to Gonzales to Baton Rouge up to Monroe, and looking at the district that goes from Donaldsonville to Baton Rouge to Shreveport. And the more we looked at it, it just became clear that trying to represent an area like that had such disparate communities and was stretched like a snake all around the state, either one of them would be incredibly difficult. Look, if you come to the capital region and you ask people, what are your top 3 things? You're going to hear over and over again. People are frustrated by the traffic problems and we need a new bridge. People are frustrated by flooding and want things to be more resilient. They're frustrated by insurance costs. And so those will be 3 of the top 5 things you hear over and over and over again in this region. If you start representing areas that are just, again, stretched like a snake all across the state, it becomes very difficult to try and figure out what are we going to prioritize.
And I want to talk about some of the things that got us here. A lot of people, whether they're your supporters or not, are saying, you know, Jeff Landry is the one who allowed this map to go into place. So do you feel that, you know, you're not supporting him right away, did not, you know, that he came after you in a way to make sure that your district would go away?
Sure. Look, I've heard those rumors just as much as anyone else. And look, I think at the end of the day, legislators were misled and that they were told that if they didn't draw the maps, that the court would. Whenever the court actually issued a decision, they explicitly provided an additional opportunity for the state legislature to draw the map. So the legislature was misled in what they were done and what they did in January and the maps that were passed, and that's really unfortunate.
You also gained a lot of national attention when Kevin McCarthy was the speaker, and you did a lot of negotiating with him along his side to get the debt ceiling raised, and that was a very controversial issue among other conservatives. So what made you really want to take that on during that time that ultimately led to McCarthy being kicked out as speaker?
Sure. So look, when I go back and look at that negotiation and look at some of the decisions we made, they were clearly some of the most important things that have been done in Congress in decades, and so you got to look at the consequences. If we had not passed the debt ceiling agreement, then you would have seen not millions, not billions, but trillions of dollars in financial impacts on people's retirement programs. You would have seen interest rates going up. You would have seen the United States financial stability and the U.S. currency being the base currency, the reserve currency for the world. All of those things undermined. Let me say it again. Trillions of dollars in impacts. So you saw some people coming out and saying that, oh, we shouldn't do this and this is a bad idea. Yet, when we actually briefed folks on the agreement, the largest savings in American history, and that we saved $2.7 trillion, the largest rescission of funds back from federal agencies in American history, the most impactful changes on work for welfare programs in decades, the biggest environmental streamlining and regulatory streamlining ever in regard to the things like a National Environmental Policy Act. I mean, that was one of the most consequential wins in decades for conservatives. And that's why people like Jim Jordan, that's why people like Thomas Massey, that's why people like Marjorie Taylor Greene voted in support of it, is because they understood that.